slapping my knee here. I'm feeling triumphant, and that's maybe what I want to talk about. We're gonna see. Hi, that is way too much. Hi, I hope you're having a good day. Today I wanted to talk about one of my favorite plants ever. It's a whole species of plant, a varietal of plant, and I think it's arguably the best, but I reserve my right to change my mind at any time, and so should you. But today we're going to be talking about the pothos. Look at that. Isn't that beautiful? When I first started getting into plants, golden pothos was the first plant that I got. So let's talk about how easy these are, how adaptable they are, how many varieties you can get, how some are very common, how some are very rare, and how no matter which of those facets you put into a blender, most of the time you're gonna get a success, and that doesn't always happen. I want that to happen more, but it doesn't always happen. We're gonna make that happen together. And today I'm surely gonna learn something, and I'm gonna teach you something too, and it'll be like monkeys picking flies off each other. I'm cutting that out. I'm Willie, by the way, and I make videos all the time. They're usually focused on my houseplants, my inner monologue, mental health, and today I'm switching it up a little bit and I'm focusing on what's working. But don't get used to it, because I'll be back to complaining next week.
Incredibly sad alocasia.
But this week, you know, it looks, it feels, it smells like optimism, at least in a performative sense. Happiness, seldom experienced, often remembered. You're gonna be happy with your pothos though. So the first thing I'm gonna show you is an example of a pothos that I think really personifies the natural aesthetic of the physical form. This is a Cebu blue pothos. I've had it for over a year. When I got it, it was like literally like 3 or 4 little cuttings. As I attempt to stand on my tippy toes and show you this cascade, I can point out this is a vining houseplant. It'll grow down and it will look like a waterfall of all your hopes and dreams. I think pothos, when they're like that, remind me of the wisteria from the Twilight Wedding. But please leave me a comment if you have a pop culture non sequitur that either rivals or parallels my Twilight Wedding reference, because I really want to know so I can start using it. The other thing is, besides vining, this is an Epi Pinnatum, and I would cautiously say that this is a trendy and rare plant, or at least it started out that way. I think you can get these more and more nowadays, and they're pretty affordable. In my opinion, very stunning and unique. This plant grows these leaves that are a lot longer and wider in form factor than most traditional pothos. And see, that's a great example. They have little holes in them. And those are the beginnings of fenestrations. And if you put this plant on a pole, I think it would like a moist moss pole the most, and it went up this way. See, you don't probably need the visual, but I'm giving it to you anyway. And it would grow upwards and towards the light. The leaves would become quite large, very in charge, not to downplay this style of growing. But you get the gist. You can grow these up and get something entirely different, and something that is very cool. And like most best laid plans, that is where I began last summer when I got that. I was gonna grow it up very large and use it as a vertical statement plant. But then I discovered that I don't have a lot of floor space. I'm not that great at keeping moss poles watered. And the most important thing is I don't care. And that's why I converted it back to just being wild and natural. But it can also make the leaves a little bit smaller. And that's what I can do with the Epi Pinnatum. Maybe that's what we're talking about today. Up next, we're gonna talk about this variety of pothos, which is Snow Queen, which is a highly white version of a marble queen pothos. Like, in my opinion, that looks very marble queen. This looks very Snow Queen. When I got this plant. All right, so we're going to be chopping up this marble queen pothos to start chasing the dream of having a Snow Queen pothos. Kathy found this in Chicago and was nice enough to bring it up. And we're gonna see if we can get a couple of Snow Queen Pothos out of this one mother plant. I went through the process of separating all of the really, really light colored variegations and then repotting them so I could get what would be the ultimate Snow Queen Pothos, I guess. This was actually the second tier heritage. And this is a great segue to talk about light requirements. I used to live in a house that had like one window, and we managed to keep pothos alive, and they pretty much thrived. But what does require substantially more light than just your average variety of dark green pothos are these varieties and variants that have an extreme amount of white. If you don't provide that, a couple things can happen. They can flounder and die, which is depressing because for some reason, Snow Queen Pothos have become really expensive, at least around here. Like one this size is about $40. But the more telltale sign is that the leaves get like this. They start creating more green, and that is because they adapt to not having as much light by creating areas on their leaves with more chlorophyll so they can photosynthesize. The green is what's getting it through, and they grow a lot slower. And in general, I think that's true for all plants with high variegation. This is an Epi Pinnatum marble queen. I guarantee you that if you looked hard enough and spent enough money, there'd be a Snow Queen variation of this, or like a high white variegated version. But this one is very healthy, it's very stable, and it works really well with my light, keeps pushing out new leaves. That's external validation, because it's making more plant. I recently made cuttings and put them in this chunky mix soil. Very sad, but you know, okay, Syrah, Syrah. And that's what we're gonna talk about now. Pothos like chunky soil, like moderately chunky. Not as chunky as I would put in like a variegated monstera. You mean like these really, really beautiful plants that you can shoehorn into this video that isn't about constellation monsteras? I don't like stuff that lets the water hang around too much because these actually, especially the variegated varieties, are very prone to root rot and the leaves turning brown if they're overwatered, which I'll show you now. This whole video is an exercise in vulnerability and my failings. But what's great about that is me sharing these things will make it so you won't have to suffer through these ailments, or at least you'll know what's happening so you can course correct. That's what keeping potted plants alive is all about, in my humble opinion, because it never really goes that well. Just like us, they're marching towards death. So this is some of the damage that can befall your variegated plants if you overwater them. See, very unattractive, very noticeable. So this is a neon pothos. My heart has a special place for these. I love chartreuse plants. They don't always love me back, but this one is, I think, the healthiest of the three that I've owned. And it had a couple of problems when I got it, and that's what I want to talk about. So this plant looks, I mean, it's grown some, but it looks about like the size and the diameter of pot. That's how it looked when I got it. So this was a hanging basket that I got from Home Depot. And it was all propagations. So it's little cuttings that have made roots, and then they put them into the soil and they ship them out. But the problem is you will get a gigantic plant that looks decently full on the top. There's really no roots there. Like, the roots are very young. And that's an issue because a deep pot that has very little roots inside of the soil gets wet. A wet environment causes anaerobic bacteria and a whole bunch of other problems, and then what ends up happening is they start rotting, and it's disappointing. And then something that looked epic and really cool is suddenly looking like this. Like, this is a great example. That's what it looks like when they start rotting. And the best thing to do is pluck out the ones that aren't doing well and repot the plant. And that's, in essence, what I did with this. And I put it into much better draining soil. Most of the time when you buy a pothos plant, it's in like a very peaty mix, and it it feels like a sponge. What's the purpose of a sponge? It holds on to water. The same thing happens to the soil. And in this case, you're not going to scrub a dish with soil. So you want it to dry out. So, you know, get a well-draining soil and your world will open up. And I need a snack. Okay, we're back to our regularly scheduled programming. I hope that the growls of my stomach were captured for eternity on this video. So here is a trendy, exciting, looks like something from Star Trek type of pothos. And this is in need of a dusting, but it is called the Baltic Blue. These are related to the Epi Pinnatum ones that I showed you. They're a little bit different. These can also be grown up a pole and get very big leaves. And in general, what I like about this plant is, even if you don't do that, as it matures, it gets the fenestrations anyway. And there's these really pretty little like arrowhead shaped leaves with the cuts. This plant's actually been trucking along for over 2 years. I wanted to use this as an example of when to up pot your pothos because, you know, anything with a high probability of survival is gonna continue to grow. You're gonna have to up pot it so it doesn't get root bound or the soil loses all of its nutrients and then they can fail that way. There are quite a few ailments you can prevent easily. Rust in peace, golden pothos, other neon pothos, and anyways, yellowing leaves, lack of vigor, softer vine. Those are some reasons you'll know that the current plant that you have is ready to repot. Pothos grow different than other plants. They also hit different, but they grow different. They keep going down and growing longer, and occasionally they will send off new shoots in the pot. Like some of these are naturally occurring, but also if you want that full head of hair look, which, I mean, I like that. This one's like a 3/4. The back looks like shit because it is on a shelf. So I am accepting that. I'm not sure I'm okay with that, but that's what's happening. That's reality. But, and it's a big but, I have added propagations to this plant to make it look fuller and not just grow longer. Because the vines will continue to grow, but they will not fill out a pot as quickly as I want them to, or maybe you want them to. If making propagations, you just cut them right before the nodes. I always just propagate them in water. Tried perlite, tried moss, I've tried a lot of stuff, and I love buying things, I love accessories, I like rare substrates. You know, I pretty much like any opportunity to spend money on a hobby, but this is one where you really don't need to. Put them in a glass of water and just wait for nature to take its course. Another thing that's this plant has a great example of and something to show is these vines. Eventually they're gonna look for points to attach to give them stability. And what ends up happening is that vine that has the leaves will stop creating them and it'll make these little runners, or at least that's what I call them. Now they are novel, they're cute, but they don't add, in my opinion, to the aesthetic of the plant. So what I like to do is cut them off, but I would cut it behind this one leaf and I would throw this out. It gives it the strength up here to grow more leaves on the vine, whereas I've had a lot better luck cutting it one leaf back, if that makes sense. Like this. And I'm gonna cut it behind that leaf. Done. These big plants are really easy. They just take time. So propagate, make them fuller. But also be aware that most of the varieties of pothos that I'm showing you are all created in a lab by botanists and scientists who put a lot of work and a lot of equity into making these plants. They're not something that was just plucked off the floor of a jungle. So it can be tricky to learn all of the specific care requirements, but it's worth it. I promise. And now we got through the hard part. There's not a test, but I'm going to test myself and see if I can remember what I told you. So pothos like to climb or vine, and you can choose either way of growing them based on your aesthetic goals and environment. The more out there and extreme the variegation, the more light has to be considered for survival and sustainability. So the Snow Queen needs a lot more light than the Baltic Blue. Also, when you get a big pothos plant at the store, a big box store, a nursery, wherever, a lot of the times the propagations don't have very good roots, and you have to be aware of that so you don't overwater the soil underneath. There is no network of veins to pull that water up and utilize it. It just stays stagnant, and it can really kill the vibe of your new plant. So I recommend repotting these into a soil that's chunky, well draining, and also has a lot of aeration. My fantasy is always a plant grows like in a radial. So if it starts out this big, it's gonna keep growing, you know, in 360 degrees larger and larger. And because pothos are vining, they can often look like they're growing a lot downward in the length. Just like that visual. But they're not growing out into the pot. And as I mentioned, eventually, sometimes they will in optimal conditions, or if you snip the vines when they get really long. But you can also fill in those bald spots, or even up pot and then add. Yeah. Another thing is like dust them once a year. The most important part is actually the best thing about the pothos, and that is it's forgiving. Like if one of those things isn't done, kind of just adapts and keeps surviving and sometimes thriving. So that's awesome because you can actually enjoy your plant, get to know it, and it's not going to cut out on you, it's not going to die, and it's not going to give you more anxiety, which is a big win for mental health. I'm a sensitive person that likes to sit in my house and enjoy convening with nature on my own terms with my potted plants. The pothos just, it's the MVP. It keeps coming through. It's amazing. I love it more and more. And collecting the varieties is really cool because weirder and more unique and just frankly out there plants keep showing up on the market. This is really a weird one. So this is called a silver streak pothos. The leaves are an incredibly cool shape, and there are painterly brush strokes, or seemingly brush strokes, on the leaves that are actually silver. It's just wild. Like, isn't that beautiful? And the leaves grow nice and large. Like, there it is next to my head. It's like the length of my head. I don't know if my head's big or normal sized. This one has been really fun to grow, and again, heavily propagated. That's why it looks so thick. This probably has at least 10 propagations that I started in here last summer and throughout the winter. I'm reaping the benefits because I actually really think this looks super duper nice. Shout out to the silver streak. There's some water on it. As I mentioned earlier about the weirdest stuff ever, this is that, I think. This is a Shangri pothos, also known as a sleeping pothos. In my opinion, it looks like delicately wilted spinach. Doesn't this look like something that would be in Beetlejuice house, like the Dietz's house? I feel like Delia would love this next to her ultra-modern sculptures. This is a really cool and really weird, rare plant that is now suddenly everywhere. So grab one while you can, because I will say these pothos, they go in and out of trend, and then they're a lot harder to get. Like 2 years ago, the silver streak was everywhere. Now I haven't seen it all summer. So nice. Another fun thing about these is they don't require a lot of light, and they actually stay a little more shriveled up if you don't give them that much light, which was actually something I learned from a comment. So I just want to say thanks for that comment. It's really nice, and it's helped me a lot because I put it in kind of the upper recesses of my plant shelves, and keeps pushing out more weird leaves that look like dying spinach. So yeah, acquired taste again. Here's one that is fun to talk about in a constructive way, my favorite activity of self-flagellation. But this is an Enjoy pothos, and when I got it, it was extremely white with just a little bit of green. It looked like kind of like a glacier variety. But as you can see in the light of my home, and away from the perfection that is very bright greenhouse light, it's just become a lot more green. That's something to keep in mind. You may end up with a plant that looks like this as opposed to the one that I thought was going to be this ultra bright white glacier pothos. To be honest, I'm not sure I would have chosen this. And how would I have known? To quote Little Edie, but how would I have known? But now you know, if you go and buy one, that you either have to have a lot of light or some supplementary broad spectrum lights, or, you know, maybe you just like a plant with more green variegation. You know, I want to accept reality more, but it's not happening. These. Okay, I'm looking here. Now I'm going to lug something very large up here to show you. It's in my top 3 plants, and I'm so proud of it. I hope it doesn't block my mic. This is a Manjula Pothos, and it is the jewel of my eye. I also think that it has the perfect spot in my entryway. So this literally began its life as 2 or 3 3-inch pots that I got at the Home Depot, and they were just tiny. And yeah, through chopping and propping and watching and watering, we now have a plant that's like almost as big as me, and if I drop this on my head, I'll get a concussion, so I'm not gonna pull those kind of gymnastics. This channel doesn't have a layer of Cirque du Soleil in it. This one is so cool, and I love showing it off, truly, and it's also a great bicep workout because it's so large. I'm gonna get some B-roll of this. Ooh. Ah. Oh my. Wow. I like standing near it. That's a thumbnail face. Anyways, so I'm Midwestern. I have a very interesting relationship with talking about my achievements. It makes me feel uncomfortable, but also I'm into it. On that journey, self-discovery again. Thank you so much for hanging out with me. I hope that this video is useful to you. I guarantee that if you are having any involvement in houseplants or potted indoor gardening, you're going to come across the pothos, and I would recommend it extremely highly. You're going to love it. You're going to love them. And, you know, like Pokemon, you're going to collect them all because it's addicting. And it's one of the few plants that actually makes me happy because it continues to grow and get better. And what's better than that? You're the best. Thanks for listening to me. Take care of yourself. If you enjoyed this video, I would very much appreciate a thumbs up. And let me know what you've seen out in the wilds of the urban jungle of big box stores and greenhouses and nurseries of pothos varieties, because I'm just so curious. I'm not trying to actively acquire, but yet, you know, I still would. Okay, Whispers, I'm gonna let you out.